There are not many Beatles songs that were truly recorded without the full involvement of Paul McCartney. Throughout most of the band's career, Paul was not only the group's primary bassist, but also one of the key musical forces responsible for keeping the structure and harmony of the Beatles songs alive. That is why, whenever stories emerge about a classic Beatles track possibly being recorded without him, it instantly becomes one of the most fascinating mysteries in the history of the legendary band. That song is She Said, She Said, from the revolutionary album Revolver. To this day, Beatles fans and historians still debate what truly happened in the studio on the night the song was recorded. Was Paul really absent from the session entirely? Or had his memory of the event simply become blurred after decades had passed? Whatever the answer may be, one thing is certain. She Said, She Said was born during one of the wildest, most experimental, and most tension-filled periods in the journey of the Beatles. By 1966, the Beatles were no longer just a pop group writing simple love songs for teenagers. They were evolving into something far more complex. Exhausting tour schedules had begun to strain relationships between the members, while their artistic ambitions were expanding at an astonishing pace. They had grown tired of the old formula. The screaming audiences at concerts had become so loud that the band could barely hear their own instruments on stage. At the same time, the music world itself was changing dramatically. Psychedelic culture, studio experimentation, and LSD use were beginning to influence the creative worlds of both British and American musicians, and no band absorbed those changes faster than the Beatles. The album Revolver became the clearest proof of that transformation. Many modern music critics even regard it as one of the most important albums ever made because of how boldly it redefined the possibilities of pop and rock music. On that record, the Beatles moved away from traditional songwriting and ventured into more experimental territory. Tape loops, strange sound effects, Indian instruments, unconventional song structures, and surreal lyrics that felt almost dreamlike. She Said, She Said became one of the finest examples of that era. The song originated from a real experience involving John Lennon during a party in Los Angeles in 1965. While touring America, the Beatles rented a luxurious house in California and hosted gatherings with several well-known figures from Hollywood's entertainment scene. The atmosphere that night was deeply psychedelic, perfectly reflecting the spirit of the mid-1960s. LSD had started becoming part of the creative culture among artists, and some of the Beatles' atmosphere had begun experimenting with the drug. As per the story that later became legendary, Jared Harrison was suffering from a bad LSD trip. In the middle of the chaos, Peter Fonda attempted to calm everyone down by recounting a traumatic childhood incident in which he had nearly died from an accidental gunshot wound. Fonda repeatedly said, "I know what it's like to be dead." The phrase immediately captivated Lennon. It sounded strange, unsettling, and philosophical all at once, perfectly matching Lennon's mental and artistic state at the time. From that brief encounter at the party came She Said, She Said, a song that would eventually evolve into one of the darkest psychedelic pieces in the Beatles' catalog. Musically, the track feels unstable in a very deliberate way. The shifting rhythms, unpredictable structure, and floating atmosphere made it sound completely different from standard pop music of the era. Many fans even consider it one of the most acid rock songs the Beatles ever recorded. Yet the greatest drama unfolded during the recording session itself at Abbey Road Studios on June 21, 1966. According to stories circulated over the years, the She Said, She Said session was filled with tension from the very beginning. At one point, a major argument reportedly broke out between Paul McCartney and the rest of the band. Some believe the disagreement stemmed from creative differences. As the song's principal writer, Lennon likely wanted to preserve its chaotic and experimental psychedelic atmosphere, while Paul McCartney was known for being far more perfectionist when it came to song structure and production. At that time, Paul was known as the last Beatle who had yet tried LSD. While Lennon, Harrison, and even Ringo Starr had become more open to psychedelic experiences, McCartney still kept his distance. Because She Said, She Said was so heavily inspired by LSD experiences, some fans believe tensions surrounding drug culture may have contributed to the heated atmosphere in the studio. Whatever the reason, Paul eventually left the studio before the session was completed. Years later, McCartney recalled the song as one of the few Beatles recordings that didn't feature his bass playing. According to his version of events, after he walked out, the others simply continued recording without him. If that account is correct, then Jared Harrison likely took over bass duties for the track. That detail makes She Said, She Said especially unique in Beatles history. While there are several Beatles songs that don't fully feature all four members, it is extremely rare for a classic-era Beatles track to exist without any contribution from Paul McCartney. Modern Beatles researchers later examined studio notes, technical documentation, and surviving session recordings from She Said, She Said. Surprisingly, their findings opened the door to another possibility. According to some experts, McCartney may have misremembered. They believe Paul did leave the studio early after the argument, but not before recording the main bass track for the song's rhythm section. If this theory is true, then the only part he missed was the later overdub process. Because recording documentation from the 1960s was not always complete, the debate will probably never be fully resolved. But that uncertainty is precisely what makes the story so fascinating. She Said, She Said feels like a song born from chaos, and the story behind its recording is equally chaotic and mysterious. The track captured a moment when the Beatles were beginning to transform from four friends from Liverpool into four artists whose creative visions were increasingly pulling in different directions. Personal tensions, psychedelic experimentation, and artistic ambition were beginning to collide openly inside the studio. A few years later, conflicts like these would become even more common during the making of albums such as Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, The Beatles, and Abbey Road. But all the early signs of that major transformation already seemed visible in She Said, She Said, a short psychedelic song that not only demonstrated the Beatles' extraordinary musical courage, but also revealed the first cracks in the creative relationship of the biggest band in the world.